Good morning. You guys ready for this? Man, it's great to be back. Great to be here. It's been an awesome week. Hopefully you guys are fired up. Just all the great things God is doing. We had a baptism last Sunday. Yeah, Nima was baptized, so that's awesome. And then I guess Jocelyn had a party, a birthday party. Yeah, it was a little out there, though. Yeah, she had some strange games going on. Where is she? I don't know. She's hiding. Anyways, one of the games was where you tied a donut to a string, and then the one person had to hold it up for another person to eat it, right? And you had to eat it all the way through and all that. Of course, the sisters were like nibbling on it, little birds, you know. The brothers are just chomping on this thing and ripping into it. It's interesting to see the dynamics of that game. I remember one time we did that in Chicago, and there's a brother who was chomping at it. He wanted to win, and it fell on the ground. Got on the ground and ate it. And, you know, I asked about, he says, 10-second rule. You know, 10 seconds, you're good. To each their own. As you notice, the Montanos are not here. They are celebrating their 10th anniversary. Wow. They're in Mexico, Cancun or something like that. It's amazing. Barb and I were at their wedding. I actually officiated the wedding. It's like your kids are growing up. It's just so weird. Anyways, there was a baptism in St. Petersburg. There's a guy by the name of Abednego who got baptized. He's a freshman and he's studying aircraft engineering in Russia. Interesting. Okay. Monday was Veterans Day, which is a federal holiday. And it recognizes the sacrifices and services of millions who have worn the military uniform. And if you've served, I want to publicly thank you at this time for your service. Now, Memorial Day is a little different. That's for those who have died while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Okay, so last week, Victor preached on a living sacrifice. Well, we're going to continue on that theme. All right? We're going to take it to another level. All right? And title of the lesson is Preparing for Battle. Actually, I'm taking it higher, Embracing the Battle. And, you know, Veterans Day, you got all that, the battle, you got to have that theme in there. And for veterans, you got to prepare for the battle, or you're in the battle, all right? And if you study the Bible, there are battles throughout the whole thing. You go in the Old Testament, there's war after war after war. And then in the New Testament, you have that, but you also have the physical battle and the spiritual battle, the emotional battle. And it's the theme, good against evil kind of thing. And as we look at our lives, we have daily battles all the time. There's the overweight battle, the battle of the bulge. That's what we call it. It's other battles, emotional, overcoming fear, overcoming sin. Physical ailments, relationships, finance, teens. You have a teenager, you know what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes it's just a battle to get to work in the morning. And 95% of this, and Victor talked about last week, is the battle in the mind. And we're going to go where he started, Romans chapter 12. We're going to look at this again. And so the whole idea here is whether you like it or not, you're in a battle. And you got to choose to decide how you're going to deal with that thing. Chapter 12, verse 1, he says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by what? The renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." And he says the way you win this battle is by renewing the way you think. Now, we're going to take a little bit step back. First thing you got to do is believe that we are actually in a battle. A lot of people can be oblivious to that they're fighting, especially a spiritual warfare. And, a lot of us don't understand that the battle is not like being in the world. Let's look at another passage. 1 John chapter 2. We really need to define this thing, because there's nothing worse than fighting a battle and not realizing it's there. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. Now, I was raised with 3 brothers, and there was consistent warfare. We would fight all the time. It got pretty physical at times, but it was always there. You didn't wonder. And a lot of times we played out, played army men and stuff like that. And my dad even gave us bow and arrows one time. I thought that was really smart, He gave us boxing gloves, and, it's just kind of promoted this thing. But there were times it was pretty serious. One time I took an Etch-a-Sketch, and I threw it at my brother, and I knocked out his tooth. And then as we got older, we didn't learn. So one of my brothers took a album. It was a 33 album, and he threw it at my face, and it hit me right here. It shattered. And the battle. Who's going to win? Point number 1, let's see the battle. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. Do not love the world or anything in the world. Anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. Point number 1 is you got to see the battle. This passage brings out a lot of spiritual truths. And basically he starts off by saying, don't love the world or anything in the world. Now, I'm sure he's not talking about trees or, mountains and all that, unless you put that above your relationship with God. But, there's a tendency to want to be like the world and give into the battle. And he's saying, no, don't do it. In fact, he says, he makes an issue of relationship. He says, if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. That's pretty dramatic. Why? Because God considers it another God. You're worshiping other things, and you're prioritizing those things above him. And he defines it. He says the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has and does. What's wrong? Well, the issue is people have a passion for other things, and they give into that. And we got to understand, he says, all this stuff will pass away. So all of that is for nothing. But the man who loves God lives forever. The man of God lives forever. And that's what really we want to do. But we got to understand, why is this so important to God? Because it is so damaging to us. And you don't have to look far around the world and see how much damage happens by being in the world, giving yourself over to it. So what are you living for? Are you living for God or worthless things? Now, I'm a little bit older, and so my perspective has changed a little bit. And when you're younger, you kind of pull things in, grab things, hang on to things. And after a while, you wonder, why do I still have this? Why am I hanging on to it? And I remember Barb and I, we went to Malaysia, and we lived with a tribe, believe it or not, in Borneo. This is true. And they hunted with blowpipes and poison darts. Well, I brought one home. My blowpipe. Huh? And everybody else is just a stick. But it's a memory. It's like, I was there, this is cool. And it's, yeah, but now what? You can't really bring it with you. And every time you move, you drag everything with you. And it's kind of like having the antlers, trophy. This is what I'm about. And I remember Barb's dad, he killed a moose. And he had this huge rack. It was so big that he had to put it upside down because it couldn't, it was so big. And I remember when he was getting older, he says, "Who wants those antlers?" Everybody's like, of course, Aaron wanted them. But it's like, what are you going to do with those things? They're huge. Come on, Barb, let's put it up in our living room. No, I never. Oh, wow, this is awesome. Did you? No, I didn't shoot it. Oh, okay. Why do you have those? But it's one of these things that we care. Why? Because we have emotional ties to things. And we begin to put worth and value in things that you just can't take with you. Now, the battle here he's talking about is not to give your energy, your time, and your heart into worthless things. The cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has. Now, we can do fun things. I'm not saying, you can't, but I'm just saying don't give your heart over to that where it owns you. If it starts doing damage to other relationships, you got to let it go. Do any of these things help you? Cravings of sin and lust of the they don't help. And yet this is what the world does, and the world promotes it. Pornography, $1 trillion business now. People have given themselves over to it. But when you give yourself over to value the things of the world, you reap what the world reaps. Depression, ruined relationships, fear and anxiety, addiction, suicide. I don't know if you've ever met somebody who's committed suicide. I've known numerous people. And it's so final, it's surreal. It's like, wow, how did I miss that? But there's a reality here that people will get to that point. And that is what the world offers. Somehow we can allow ourselves to get sucked in. We have a relationship with the creator of the universe. We shouldn't be depressed. We should be bouncing off walls. All the energy. I have my quiet time. I don't know what's wrong with me. I fired up. But because we easily get sucked back into the world, we lose that. In Matthew 6, let's turn there. We read this passage all the time, and yet we don't apply it. Matthew 6, verse 25. It's a great example. Difference between how the world thinks and how God thinks. Verse 25. Therefore I tell you, this is Jesus' words, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or about your body, or what you'll wear. Is not life more important than food, and body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown in the fire, will he not much more clothe you? O you of little faith. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Throughout the whole New Testament, Jesus is trying to change how we think. And worry is a big one. Now, he says, don't worry about food or drink or what you'll wear. In America, we don't worry about those things. You know, the majority of the world does, but we don't. Why? Because we're wealthy. And yet we still worry. It's crazy. You go to some of these other countries and you're worried about what? They can't fathom this. You know, this last week, Barb and I work with the Russian churches, and so I'm always asking, what's the spirit of the church? How are you doing? And there's one brother who keeps saying, I'm alive today. And it's like, wow, I don't think like that. And it's kind of weird because they were very paranoid that Trump was not going to win. Now, I don't get political, but I'm trying to share their mindset here. In their mind, something needs to change. And therefore, this is their hope, not God. And in their minds, this has got to change. Over 500,000 men have died. Men. Imagine that. And so there's this ripple effect. Everybody knows somebody who has died. And for you to have a war that's lasted that long, the economy has crashed. A ruble now, 12,000 rubles for $1,000. It's changed dramatically. And we forget what's going on there because it's not in the forefront of our minds. And we're anxious about, that person looked at me funny. It's like, come on. Jesus says, hey, don't worry. What is an ounce of worry worth? And he says, hey, keep your focus. The battle is in your mind. He says, you have little faith. This is the battle. What you believe is what you will do. If you get the bigger picture, you act like it. But once again, we get distracted and get sucked into what the world says. He says, seek first his kingdom, his people, his word, the king, and his righteousness. Do what's right. Well, you start doing what's right, you go against the grain. People start calling you weird. Now, everybody gets called weird for all sorts of reasons, but, hey, why are you giving it? Why? And what we give our hearts to, people don't understand. And it's like, would I want to be like you? What you're struggling with, what you're giving into? Fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. That's what I want. Call me weird, but I'm happy weird. I figured I'd get that a little bit from you. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Now, you guys have known this for many years. A lot of you studied this. You even teach it to people. Do you still worry? That's really the difference. It's knowing it versus doing it. And that's really the spiritual warfare. That you got to believe it's there. And you can get sucked into saying, yeah, I'm doing it, but you're still worried, then you're not doing it. You got to change. You can't hold out to people this example, this lifestyle that Jesus was and wants us to have if that's not you. You can't inspire people with your life if you're still living like the world. A lot of us have the eyes on the wrong battle. Now imagine, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, let's say Malik here. Malik and Alexis have a fight before work. Yeah, and Malik's attitude all the way to work. And he has a bad day at work. Somebody lies about him, and he gets chewed out. Not that that would ever happen. And, something happens, and all the whatever says it was his fault, and he's getting chewed out. And he's having a bad day. And somebody ate his sandwich in the refrigerator. It's a bad day. But on his way home, he gets hit by a car. And the ambulance comes, and he's taken to the hospital. It's very serious. All of a sudden, all these other things don't mean anything. It changes your perspective. And Alexis is crying, oh, we had a fight, I'm sorry. But that's the reality. And then the next day he gets a call from a doctor that he had been seeing, and he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but you got cancer. Change your life. All of a sudden the battle has changed. Now I share these things because both those things happened to me. Both of them. And we got to understand there's a reality here. And if you don't stay focused on a spiritual level, these things will take you out. It's all about perspective. In the world, we destroy our marriages. We destroy our relationships with our kids. We create hatred because we just aren't spiritual people. Whereas we could transform lives by our passion with God. He says, seek first these things. Why? Because you got to make it a priority. It's got to be on our mindset. In Matthew 11, verse 28, Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest for your souls. For my burden is light and easy. Now, that's sure it's a lie. But it takes a lot of focus to come to Jesus and to take his yoke upon you. To do his will, not your will, his will. He's got a better plan. And it's going to create conflict. But in the end, God knows, listen, there's a lot of great benefits in a relationship with me. This week, I was going through some stuff that I had, memorabilia. And every so often I'll do that and start throwing things out, and what do I need this for? And I found a notebook that I wrote, and it kind of had a journal in it. And I read it, and I thought, I was a mess. Oh my gosh. And it was 26 years ago. And I thought, wow, how grateful I am that I've been rescued from that lifestyle. And hopefully you can look back at journals you've had and see the growth in your life. Because you're not meant to stay where you're at. But if you get sucked into the world, you can go even further and go worse than you're at. Now, for me, I got a lot more pressure than I did 26 years ago. A lot more now than I've ever had. But I feel the joy. You don't see me anxious or frustrated. I mean, we work with all of Russia, Caucasus, and now they're talking about us working with Mongolia, of all places. What's in Mongolia? I don't know. They even have a place called Outer Mongolia. What's that? Okay. Let's go to Ephesians 6. You guys getting all this? I don't know. We'll see. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Paul's writing this. And he says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And it's interesting, Paul's saying, listen, this is the real battle. You don't even see it. There's a spiritual warfare going on for your soul. And he says, you got to put the full armor of God so you can fight this battle. Yeah. And we don't realize how real it is. It's got to become real or else we won't fight it. Whether you like it or not, you're in a battle. And it's not just the physical battle we see here. It is a spiritual warfare. Now, you can choose to run from it or embrace it. Point number 2, embrace the battle. All right, let's go to Matthew chapter 14. We're going to read about an example of this. Matthew 14. I always love reading about Jesus' miracles, how they relate. Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking in the light, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, and he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Save me, Lord." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught him. "You have little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed in the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." What an awesome situation. I would love to have been there. But imagine you're in the boat, you're one of the apostles, all right? And it says that the water was kind of rough here. And it says that they were buffeted by the waves, so they're straining at the oars. Now, you know it's dark because it's the fourth, watch of the night. And Jesus is walking on water to them. Now imagine, first of all, you said, well, what the heck is that? You know, and it's coming closer, and it's coming at us. And they start freaking out. It can't be a person. People can't walk water. It's got to be a ghost. And it says they cried out in fear. Ah! Can you imagine that? All these guys, fishermen. I didn't do that. No, that was John. He was freaking out. And Jesus says, verse 27, "Take courage, it is I." And Jesus knows that we live lives of fear. And so the whole idea here is we're in a boat. and things are choppy from time to time. And we're in a boat with a bunch of people who are also straining at the oars and straining at life. And then all of a sudden, Jesus shows up into our lives. And we can tend to be very fearful. Because we know that there's a whole spiritual, and even in fact, if we see miracles, a lot of times we don't want to approach Jesus. Why? Because of fear. And Peter, he's like, "Hey, I want to come out there." And Jesus is like, "Okay, that's pretty cool. Come on. Peter gets out. He starts walking a little bit. This is awesome. But all of a sudden, he's getting further from the boat. And he's starting to notice, this is not good. Wind, waves, and he begins to sink. And Jesus grabs him. And he says, "You have little faith." Little faith? Guy walked on water. Now, I would think that Jesus would have said, "Peter, that was awesome. Fantastic, you did it." Now, he said, "You little faith, why'd you doubt?" And that's us in life. We'll make those steps towards Jesus. And we start letting go of our security. And that's what the boat was for them. That's the security. And we have securities in our life that aren't very stable. We put security in our jobs. Have you ever lost your job? Yeah. We put security in people. People aren't perfect. Have you ever had people you trusted let you down? Yeah. We don't have much security, and yet we cling to these things. One of the biggest things we cling onto is our perspective, because we have so much wisdom. We've been around for so long. We trust in our incredible insight. You ever been wrong? Yeah. And so Peter takes that step. A lot of times people won't even get out of the boat. They're like, okay, let's just see what happens to Peter. And we watch other people, okay, let's see what happens to them. Versus just looking at Jesus. You know, Hebrews 12 says that Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. And we need to fix our eyes on Jesus. And Peter begins to sink. And I think for all of us, we got to realize who we're dealing with. This is our life. We're all in a boat, getting beat up, thrown around. And we got to come out, and we got to do miracles. We got to be able to walk on water and do things never thought impossible. We're battling all sorts of things in life, but we got to embrace the battle. We can't flee from it. We can't hide from it. We got to go after it. Attack mode. That was Jesus' heart. You attack the battle. And you look at in the Old Testament, how many examples of that where they ran to the battle. That's what God says, listen, this is what I'm about. I don't want you to have a mediocre life. I want you to soar. I want you to do awesome, but you got to trust me. You got to look to me. Peter did miracles, and so can we. You know, we think sometimes it's scary to be a disciple, but it's scarier out there. And a lot of times we just don't think that way. We give into the things of the world. We start to love the world and suck back right into that depression again. Jesus said, don't love the world. Why do we doubt? How do we embrace the battle? We do it by trusting in Jesus. Look in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Now, once again, in Romans 12, you don't have to turn there, but Victor looked at it last week, and basically it says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what Jesus is always trying to do. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. All right, so Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, and they have a lot of battles there. And this is what he says. The weapons we fight with are not weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. You know, Paul is saying, listen, the weapons of the world, you know, people use those things, but ours is so much more powerful. You know, on the other night, what night was it? Friday night? They had the Tyson fight. Did you guys? All right, you hear the response there. You know what I'm talking about. And I told Barb, you know, Tyson's younger than I am. I should do that. What did he get paid, $20 million? I'll go out there and get hammered on for $20 million. Why not? You know? But, you know, it was one of those things that why is there so much attention to this? You know, Tyson was an interesting fighter, okay, boxer. And in the pre-thing, they had Evander Holyfield there. Back in the day when they boxed, he bit off his ear. It's like, oh my gosh. And now, you know, the Netflix thing kept stopping, and it was frustrating, right? But the fight before it was two women. I don't know if any of you saw that. And one of the girls would headbutt the other one. Boom, boom, boom. And I guess she's known for it. It's dirty fighting. And, you know, the ref said, you do this, you know, you're going to be taken out. You got to stop it. In the meantime, this girl had a gash right here, and her eyelid kind of flopped forward. Very pretty, very pretty. And you think, why do people do this? People are going to suffer in the world for, they want a name, they want people to honor them, they want all sorts of things. And yet we could have so much more impact on the world around us by really keeping our focus on Jesus. So many people are focused on that fight versus focused on Jesus. Where the real battle is. Jesus died on the cross. That was a battle. And the biggest thing to me was the mental toughness that Jesus had to allow people to spit on him, beat him, flog him, and torture him to death and not just fry everybody. He could have said, I'm done. Done. And a lot of times we don't realize battle's up here. We got to stay focused. You guys like being angry? You like worrying? Like getting depressed? Then why do we do it? Why? Stop it. We can do this. We can focus on Jesus. It's a powerful tool we have in our hands. But we don't do it. Here's a quote that I want to share, actually two. There's a guy by the name of David Goggins. Have you guys heard of him? He is an ultra-marathon runner. He's an ultra-distance cyclist, a triathlete, and he's a retired U.S. Navy SEAL. Okay, intense little guy, right? All right, this is what he says. A warrior is not a person that carries a gun. The biggest war you ever go through is right between your ears. It's in your mind. We're all going through a war in our mind, and we have to become callous in our mind to fight that war and to win that war. There's another guy by the name of Baruch Spinoza. All right, I don't know if you guys know who that is. He was a religious philosopher in the 1600s. And he says, peace is not an absence of war. It is a virtue. It is a state of mind. You see, we all have battles. In conclusion here, we all have battles. All right, it's a reality. And instead of ignoring it, we need to run from it. We must embrace it because it makes us better when we embrace the fight. The goal is to train our minds to think like Jesus, doing what Jesus did, having joy, peace, and all the attributes, and creating miracles because we can. What I want you guys to do is talk to your discipler this week and talk about your battles. What is your battle? And come up with a plan to overcome. Now, it doesn't take much to look at Milwaukee. There's a lot of battles going on. Physical, emotional, spiritual. We can point to Jesus. We could say, here's the real battle. You can win this if you have faith, and the glory be to God.